Everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. Today we're going to be covering payroll year end for Canada. And before we jump into the system here, of course, there are some things I'd like to review for year end. So first off, let me have this disclaimer here. So if you have any questions regarding the taxability of incomes or deductions, please consult first with an accountant, a tax advisor, or tax consultant. Our support team and our implementation team cannot provide tax advice. What we can do is once you have that advice and somebody tells you how something should be taxed, we can help with the configuration of that following that guidance that you provide us, but we're not going to provide any guidance on how things should be taxed. And the following slides do contain the latest data as of November 21st, 2024, and are subject to changes from the CRA. All right, so I do want to talk about some of these limits here that are going to be changing for 2025. And so you can see them listed here. I'm just going to talk about these three. So for savings and pension plans, we have money purchase registered pension plans, RPP plans. The limit is increasing by $1,320 to $33,810. The RRSP, or registered retirement savings plans, they are increasing to $32,490, an increase of $930. And the deferred profit sharing plans, or DPSP, are increasing to $16,905, which is an increase of $660. So just wanted to point those out to you, and I'll show you where we would make those changes in the system, just so you get an idea of where that would be, and then you'll be able to update your system. So let's go ahead and switch over to my demo system here, and you can see basically what we're going to be doing in the system here. I do want to remind everybody that we do have a Q&A and a chat. So if you do have any questions on anything, please feel free to ask us those questions and we'll try to answer them. And if we're not able to get back to you today or answer them today, we will reach out to you and answer those questions, through email, or you're certainly welcome to email us directly with those questions that you might have. So to be able to see my system here. And of course, part of what we're going to do is see stuff here in self-service, but most of what we're going to be doing here is in the payroll backend here. So the administration is where we're going to be doing all these things and making possible changes for the next year. So I'm going to go to my settings here. We're going to talk about some of the things you need to do for your year end. And I'm actually going to start here in HR administration as a reminder of the couple of days that you'll need to set up in the system. This is especially important if you're doing timesheets. It also affects time off plans. So if people are doing either one of those in self-service, you're going to want to make sure your holidays are configured for 2025. So in fact, let me delete this one here just so you can see how this step goes through. So you may be like mine and you just have one for each year, but some people, they have people work weekends or alternative schedules, and you may have multiple holiday calendars for different, employers, groups of employees, et cetera. So you may need to do this process more than once, but I'll go through the steps here and you'll see how that works. So first thing is you can clone an existing one if you like. Of course, you don't have to do that. You could create a new one if you like by just clicking add. I think cloning is a little bit easier because it does some of the lifting for you. So check the box next to the one you'd like to clone. Or if there were multiple, you can check multiple, and then you'd hit the clone button. All right, when you do that, of course, what it's done is basically taken the information that's there, and I'm going to change the years in these right here. All right, now you may want to change the name and the code. That's certainly, you're welcome to do that. And if you need to, perhaps there's a different income code that you need to use. So you could go ahead and do that right there. right? But here's my clone of that. And now I can go in and I can adjust the different days if I need to do that. So again, I might want to change the name, put in something like 2025 rather than saying clone, or perhaps there's another name there. Reviewing the group that it applies to. In my situation is all of my active employees, but again, you might have groups for different regions or schedules or something like that. Here you'll see the regular close days in my situation is Saturday and Sunday. And if you want to put down how many hours per day they get for holiday, you can do that. So if they get 8 hours for the stat holiday, you can put that down there. There's also formulas you can put in there, perhaps if you need to look back over a certain period of time to determine those hours, or maybe they're part-time and they're only going to get 4 hours or something like that. So you populate that number there. Here you'll see that income code that was previously selected when I cloned it. I could change it here if I need to. All right, and then down at the bottom, you'll see the various holidays that are in your system here, or at least in my system, I've got these set up. Now yours, of course, might have a different list. And so you're certainly welcome to, adjust this if you need to. But what you'd want to do is go through and make sure these dates are correct. So New Year's Day is pretty straightforward. It's got to be the first. But, Good Friday. And when you go into here, you'll notice, of course, it's not on a Friday because this is the date it was last year was March 29th of 24. This next year, 2025, could be different. I don't know off the top of my head the date of Good Friday because that's definitely one that moves around. So that one might not just be as simple as the 28th. It could be some other day. Same thing with Easter Monday. And of course, the other holidays, you can go through and put them in just like you need to. All right. So you can just select the days and make sure they're correct. So super easy to change these things. And you'll notice here, I could type it in. So if I needed to change the dates in there, I can type it in there for any of these things out there. All right. So want to make sure those are correct in there. Now, if you don't update one, but you catch it before that holiday comes up, you can update it later on in the year. The one thing to be into consideration there is if somebody has requested time off and it's around that holiday. So as an example, let's say somebody requested off September 1st through the 7th, and I inadvertently had this on the wrong day, it's going to skip this day if my time off plan is set up that way. So you would need to make sure that nobody has requested that day off, and then may have to adjust their time off request. So it's good to get it correct up front. You can fix it later if you need to, but then you need to take into consideration things like timesheets that may have been created or time off requests. All right, so that's your holidays that you'll need to configure there. Now, there's other things that can also be changed. I'll just touch on it. Company events, you might have things in there. I'm not covering that because that's not payroll. And there's other time off plans or another thing that you might need to change something for next year. That's not payroll related directly. So I'm going to skip over that, and we can, certainly answer questions if you have on that. Payroll schedules. All right, so this is something that you'll want to review if you have multiple, like I have. You might need to make multiple ones of these, make adjustments for each year. So you can certainly do that there. So when you're looking at this, you'll see, as an example, let me go into my weekly. And if you just have one, great. If you have multiple, you might need to review each one. But you'll see here that I will need to put in a schedule for the next year. All right, now this is very easy to do. In fact, let me just see if I don't have one created in here. All right, I don't. So I'm going to show you on a semi-monthly basis what you would do, but it's going to be the same steps if you have, let's say, weekly or fortnightly, biweekly, monthly, some other frequency. What you'll do is you'll come into the existing schedule, assuming you're going to use that going forward, and you're going to go ahead and click on new right here. Now, it is certainly possible you want to create a new schedule. Maybe you're switching to some other frequency starting in January, in which case you can create an entirely new schedule that you would like to create. All right, but if you're going to use the existing ones, you just click on new. You'll notice it does already pre-populate the year of 2025 and is saying, when does it start? And then how many periods you're going to need to create. So this is semi-monthly. So I need to create 24. If you're doing fortnightly / biweekly, it's going to be 26, weekly 52, etc. You'll need to create those. All right, and then you would just click generate. And what we're doing is when we're looking at things like how many days after the pay date, it'll look at the previous schedule to determine the start and end date. So that's super easy. You may now need to go through and review these pay dates to make sure it doesn't fall on a weekend or a holiday. So click into here and adjust these as appropriate. All right, now this is something, and of course you can adjust as you're processing payroll. If you happen to miss one of these for whatever reason and you need to adjust it on the fly, you're welcome to do that when you're processing payroll. You can change the date from the 5th to some other day if you need to do that. But if you do it here, you don't have to remember to do it in the future. So you'll want to review all these days and make sure that they are the correct days that you're actually going to pay them, and it's not like on a Sunday or something like that. Right. And of course, repeat that for all the other pay groups, or sorry, payroll schedules that you need to do. Now, if you do create a new payroll schedule, you'll want to go into here and set up the pay group that's going to use that schedule. You cannot change the schedule on an existing pay group. So if you do create a new schedule, you'll also need to create a new pay group. So just to be aware of that if you do need to do that. All right, so those are your schedules and your holidays. All right, let's look at deductions. And of course, let's look at those things for those deductions I was just mentioning, like let's say your RRSP or your DPSP or whatever you might have. So you can go into that particular deduction and you can change the limit in here if you need to. So you'll notice here, I don't have a limit, but let's say I had the old limit in here, I can put in the new limit right there. All right, same thing with RRSP as an example. You could put in the limit on here if you want to. Now you don't have to put it in here. Of course, the problem is if you don't, it's not going to stop, and then you might be running into problems. So we recommend you put the limit in here. Now be aware that if you do have pooled deductions, in other words, let's say I had a flat dollar amount for this and a percentage option for this, you might want to pool them together so that way they share the same limit. So if that's the case, you'll want to make sure this is checked. And then whichever one is the parent plan would be the one you update. And then all the other ones that are related through here would update as well. That only affects the pool. If you don't have it pooled, then you don't need to worry about that. But just be aware, if you do have it pooled, that you only need to update the parent and it will update the child plans as you do that. Now, of course, there might be other deductions that you need to go through and update. For an example, perhaps, this group life, you have an annual amount on here and you need to change that. You'd want to change those too. This is obviously not something that is statutory. This isn't coming out from, the government saying how much the limit is, but you might have a limit on a particular deduction that changes next year, in which case you can change that on there. Now, another thing to be aware of is where something shows up on the T4. So on a deduction, if you want to make sure that it shows up in a particular box, that's where these system labels come into play. So you'll notice here, this one is going to show up in the T4 box 52, and this is the employer. So that is right here. And of course, you can choose other boxes. Now, you would want to make sure it's in the correct box. You don't want to show it in the wrong one. But if you want to make sure it shows there, if you come into your system labels, you can do that. All right, make sure the T4 box that is selected is the appropriate one for that particular deduction. All right, the same thing could happen with earnings or income. So if there's an income that you want to show in a box or needs to show in a box, the system label will take care of that. All right, let's look at tax rates. So you shouldn't need to do anything here in your tax rates, but if you do have the TD1 form linked to your tax rate, and now there's a new one for 2025, as you see, I didn't update it for 2024, so I might want to update it for 2025 to just make sure the dates and everything on the form are correct. You can come in here to this here, and you would change this to the correct form for 2025. All right, so you will want to go ahead and do that if you update your form. This, if I just added a new form, it doesn't know that it needs to be linked to this tax code. So be aware of that there. All right, now, of course, we will be updating the tax rates behind the scenes. So like your federal tax, as an example, will automatically update in the system. You don't need to go and change the rates on anything like that. those automatically get changed with the right effective dates. And if anything ever changes mid-year, I know we're talking about the rollover for the new year, but if anything ever changes mid-year, we handle that for you. We keep those monitors. I see conversations internally on those all the time about these changes are coming down from whatever agency. So we handle those, and they're always in there with the correct effective dates ahead of time. So those should be taken care of with you for no problem there. All right, now of course there might be other things that change effective on January 1 that are directly payroll related. For an example, perhaps you have new certified rates if you're a union and you got to pay certain rates, and if they change in January, you can come into your rate tables in here and you can change those with the right ones. So you'll notice here, like the effective dates are 2023. Perhaps you've got new ones that are effective 12/31/24, and those need to be updated. Now, I'm not going to go through all the steps here, but you can import those, you can update those, whatever you might be doing there. All right, so that's an example of that there. Maybe you have commission plans that have new rates for the year. Perhaps there's minimum wage, you're using that, and that changes. Again, this is something that you could have in here, and you might say in this particular city or province, there's a new minimum wage effective in the year. You can have that effective date here and say January 1st, 25 in this particular city or something like that. Here's the new rate. So you'll want to use that. Of course, if you're not using minimum wage, you can ignore that. All right. So all of those things are possible to change there. Shift rates might be something that changes in there. Workers' comp could be another one if you do the situation to calculate workers' comp. Those types of things might change. Now, I do want to point out, if for whatever reason, going back to those system labels that show things correctly on the T4, if you do not see those, I want to show you where you can add them if you need to. So under your user code tables, right here under code tables, you'll see label is an example here. And when I come into here, you're going to see all of those RL1 and T4 boxes. I've got them all configured here, but it's possible that they're not here for you. So all you would need to do is put them in. Now, this is the correct format. So it does need to be T4 underscore box and then underscore whatever the box number is. So this is the correct format for the code. You could change the description. I wouldn't recommend it because if I just put down some other name, like the name of the actual box, that might be confusing. I recommend leaving the description the same as the code, but you could have a different description. All right, so make sure these are here. If you don't see one, you just click add and you would type in the code and description. If you don't see it, or let's say it is here, but you don't see it in the deductions, make sure it's active. It's also possible that you've inactivated it for some reason and now you need to use it. You can always come in here and check that box to make it active. All right, so that's an example of that. Now let's look at some of the reports you might want to run here. In fact, I'm going to open up different tabs here to kind of get these all going. But let's talk about, first off, I'm going to, just to get the T4s going, I'm going to run this one and then I'll go back to some other reports out here. In fact, let me open this up in a new tab. All right, so I'm going to show you how to run the T4, but I'm going to also, because it takes a while, run some other reports. So you'll see here, T4, of course, the format being PDF because I want to actually generate them. What is your business number? You want to do the employee or the employer? What year is it? 2024. Do you want to put a number in Vox 82? You want to run it for a specific employee or employee group? You can do that right there. And then I'm going to hit apply. Now I'm going to let this run because this will take a while in my demo system. Let's talk about some of the other reports that you may want to run here. So if you need to look at totals for certain deductions, or maybe even individual deductions, and you want to see how they compare to what's on the T4, now they will match because, or at least they should match because it's all pulling from the same data, but maybe you didn't have that box in there or you had in the wrong one and you're expecting it to be in a certain box and it's not. That's where this might be super useful to look at this. So I'm going to look at this deduction totals report. This is going to be each deduction. I'm going to run it for the current year because I'm still in 24. Of course, if this was January, I'd do previous year. And then I'm going to run this report right here. I'm going to let that one run. It maybe won't take that long, but I want to look at the other one here, which is going to be deduction totals by employee. So again, this is one where you may want to run like one particular deduction for, whatever reason. So maybe you're looking just at your DPSP plan and you just want to see those. You can go ahead and select just one deduction if you need to do that. So you just go and, check that one as an example. All right. And then, maybe you need to run it just for a smaller group of employees or something like that. You're certainly welcome to do that. And then you would hit apply in this situation. All right, let me jump back to this one. So this is that deduction totals. You'll notice here we have the employer totals up here at the top and the employee totals down here at the bottom. So, this is your totals. And you can see there, all right, we had a total of, let's say, extended healthcare, 78, 44, 16. All right, so that might be useful one to look at those totals if you need to do that there. This one, services video, I'll let that one go. That one's going to be very useful if you want to see the individual employees. All right, similar thing to that would be your income reports. Now, these are basically the same thing as your deduction, except for this is incomes. So you may want to run this for, the current year. Again, if you're doing it this year, if you're doing it, in 25, you'll choose previous year. And again, I may want to put down like a specific income code. If I want to do that, maybe I just want to look at my bonuses or something. But I'm going to run it for all and let that go ahead and process there. Let's see if this will, here we go. So now mine is super easy. I just have one person with this plan. And so I can see that there. But if I had hundreds, I could compare each one and see, all right, here was their total for ER was $7,000. And of course, that if it's showing on my T4, I can verify that it's correct. All right, I'm going to move down to taxes just so you can see the reports there you may want to run. Again, I'm going to run this one taxable wages by tax because this will show me the individual employee details. This taxable wages total is going to show me like the combined total, let's say, for your income tax for all employees. So not extremely useful unless you're looking at like a total of your T4s. All right, my current year here, again, because I'm in 25, and I'll go ahead and run that. Just let that run. Okay, this is still processing. I just want to see if my T4s are done. So this is where I should have prepared a little bit. I apologize, but this is where these reports will run, and then we can compare that with our T4s. I do want to, while these are running, talk about publishing your T4s to self-service. So if that's something you would like to do, you need to do a little bit of configuration ahead of time if you've not done this before. Now, if you have, great. You don't need to do anything here. You may want to just review it. But we're talking about document delivery. And if you wanted to show into self-service, you actually need to make a folder first. So you would go up into your general and choose documents. Now, if you're just going to do email, you don't have to do this because it'll email it to the person. But if you want it to be in self-service, you need to make a folder for where it's going to land. All right, so I have a T4 folder, but let me just show you how to do that. Let's just call this T4 instead of like each year. I could make another one like I made this one called tax forms. And that's really all you need to do as far as creating the folder. Call anything you like. If you mistyped it, maybe did lowercase, you could do that. Now, this could be useful for certain groups. I don't think it's super useful to have that here for this particular purpose, but it could be useful for other things if you want to do like access by group. I'm going to make it open to all, so everybody's T4 would go to the same folder. Now, let me go to document delivery here and show you how you would set up this right here. So I'm going to just call this T4. All right, which report do I want to do here? I'm going to do the T4. I'm going to make it active. Now, if I intend to email it, I may want to use their personal email instead of their primary email address. So that's my option right here. If I check this, it's going to go to the personal email first. If it's populated, it'll send it out. So maybe they have Gmail or something. It would send it out to Gmail. If it's not populated, it'll go back to the primary. So it's not like it's not going to go out at all. If the personal one is blank, it'll go back to primary. And then what am I going to do here? Post in self-service or send by email. So probably want to send by email since I selected that. If I do post in self-service, it's going to ask which folder do I want to send it to. And I would just click on the folder there and hit select. All right, so if you intend to either email or post them to self-service or both, you do need to set this up before you actually print your your T4s got caught in the US there. But before you print your T4s, if you get to the point of previewing your T4s and then you realize, oh, I want to publish these, it's unfortunately, I'm not going to say too late, but you have to go and set up the folder again and rerun the report. So you can still rerun it, but it's just going to take you a little bit more time. All right, so that would be the document delivery there. Let me go into my reports. Okay, so here, that one is still in my income. So here's my taxable wages by tax code. So you'll see each tax code here, and then each employee. And of course, then we have gross wages, subject and taxable wages, as well as the adjusted wages. And then we have whether it's employee withheld or employer. Of course, it depends on, the type of tax. And you would just go through, I got a lot of employees here, and then you come down to the next tax code. So after that is now my Canadian employment insurance. And of course, now I've got that number. All right. So you can see how that's in there. And each tax code is going to be in here. Now, this is 233 pages, so it's very long. You may want to export this out to Excel. So changes to say Excel and look at it in there. Of course, it's up to you on how that works there. But this is going to show you your taxes for each one. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is because it might be useful for you to look at just federal, Canadian FWT. If you wanted to see it by employee, that's this one. So in other words, let's say Jonathan Collins here, I would see all of his taxes kind of together in one report, and then it would go on to the next person. So that might be useful if you're going for each T4 to run it by employee instead. Let's see if this is done. It's almost done. This one's almost done too. All right, so I did want to talk about those. Hopefully we get to that in there. But that's this report here, as I mentioned, this is going to show up by employee. So if you want to run it that way, you can certainly do that there. All right, let's see if it's inching its way there, almost there. Here's the delivery button. Now, I did want to point out in self-service, we do have a new option. And let me show you what that option is, where the employee can opt out of receiving a paper copy. So if they come up here to their preferences, this gear icon, and they choose preferences, we now have this right here where they can choose paperless delivery of their tax documents. That means it will not print a paper copy. It'll only be for delivery. Of course, you need to have that delivery set up. If I don't, that's not really going to do anything. I won't be able to actually send it if I don't have it set up. So this will be meaningless. But you'll notice here as I check this, we have a little, statement here that they need to agree to. This is something that the employee opts into instead of opting out. So they would need to opt into this. Each employee go into their settings and hit I agree. And now this would deliver just for this employee their T4 electronically only. So whether it's by email or by self-service or both. And so this is a new setting. I think this was in our last release. If not, it was the one before that. I know it's new this year. And let's see. Okay, so here's my income totals. Just again, to look at this. Again, this is going to be each, similar to that tax report I was just running, each income code, and then the employees underneath it. So if you wanted to review this way, you could do that. If you run the income summary, that one does it for each employee and then their income. So in other words, you would do like Alan Abel here, and then all of his incomes. And then it would go down to Christopher Abel and all of his incomes, et cetera, going down the list. So that might be a different way of looking at it. You may be familiar with these reports. And there's a tax one. Let's see if these are almost done. But this drop down menu right here is where you would do that delivery. I wanted to show this. I should have started this earlier. I wanted to show how this actually would do this. You'll have an option in here to print and to publish paperless in this delivery button. Now, of course, the publish paperless requires that setting. If nobody has that, they're going to get a paper copy. You can still post, but it's going to also print. If they have this checked, it'll just post. All right, now I noticed that Patrick had to drop out. I want to see if there's any questions in here that I need to answer. Okay, good. There's no questions. I have to kind of play both roles here. I don't see any questions so far. Let's wait. I wanted this to finish here. If you do have any questions, please let me know while we're waiting for this one. If I understand if people need to drop now that it is half past, you might need to drop to go to another meeting. We will post this out as a video. and I'll show this last step of the publishing. I'm hoping this will only take another minute or so to do that. But I can show you where it'll show up for the employee while we're waiting. So if they go into their documents right here, you'll have this drop down depending on where your folders are, but reports is where it's going to land. So this one is a default folder name, and then you'll see like your T4. Now I haven't published anything, so nothing is going to be there. Oh, I guess I have published. I just created that folder, so I thought maybe there wouldn't be anything there, but you would see 2024, and then you'd be able to view it or download it right there and do that. Now this will be just theirs. So you'll notice like the size of this. I do want to point out because some people get concerned when you go to that folder here and you go to documents, it's going to be much bigger than the individual employee. See how this is 215 megabytes? This is the entire company's T4. So if I want to look at this from a payroll perspective and I publish them, I can see this here. This is the entire company's. The employee does not see that in self-service. They see their own. So I know some people get concerned because they go, oh my gosh, I see this massive one. It's got all the employees in it. And, I'm worried it's going to be shared with everybody. It's not. This is just kind of like a placeholder that we upload the entire thing. They only see their individual one. All right. So don't be too concerned about that. I know first time I saw it back when we first did this, I was concerned. So I can imagine other people there. And I do apologize. I should have started this before, but this is where you would publish it. So what's going to happen here is it will show a preview of your T4s. You'll be able to look at those. I believe mine is sorted by last name. So I think Christopher Abel was my first person. I would see him and I could look at his T4 on screen there. Of course, I could choose to, because I'm viewing it on screen, even without this button here, I could print out like my own copy or download it for my own records if I needed to as a payroll person. But this is what actually will do the process of delivering it to the employees. So depending on that setting with ESS and email, it's going to email people who, have their email. And again, it might go to their primary or their personal, depending on your setting there. And it's going to upload it to self-service. And that's what's going to happen there. And then there will be an option in there that says to print. And that'll just be the people who don't have it selected. So again, I apologize here that this did not come up quickly enough. I don't want to sit here and wait because I don't know how long it's going to take at this point. So I don't see any additional questions from anybody out here. If you do have some questions, I'm going to leave this running, but I'm going to bring up my slide presentation. And if it does finish here in the next minute or so, then we can talk about that. But let me bring up my slide presentation. So we can talk about our upcoming learning on here. So for right now, I have this scheduled out here, which is our new mobile app. You may be aware of this. You might actually be using this, but I want to just show our new mobile app to people who maybe are using the older version. We still support the older version. If you go out to your app store or your Play Store, you're going to see both of them out there. If you search for Criterion HCM, you can actually have both installed and, look at them side by side if you want to. We will be phasing out the original, the 1.0 version sometime next year. We don't have an exact timetable on it, but sometime next year we'll be phasing that out and you'll be using the 2.0 going forward. But I want to introduce it to people who maybe haven't seen it or, answer questions on that. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. There's not going to be anything immediately after the new year because I realize a lot of people take time off around there. So January 9th is going to be our first one of 2025. We're going to be talking about our mobile app 2.0. The next one after that is for the US. So Affordable Care Act reporting is the US. You're certainly welcome to join us if you want to see something about it, if you want to see what they have to suffer through. You're certainly welcome to join and look at that one there. And then into February, I do have some things kind of on my map, but I don't want to announce them and then have to move them. They're depending on our release and the end of January. So I want to make sure that they're actually included there and before we announce that. But suffice to say, we do have stuff on the schedule and of course going out further into the year. But I just want to announce these next two. Let me just look one last time to see if it did finish. It did not. So unfortunately, it didn't finish. But thank you for joining me today. Appreciate your time. I'm sorry I couldn't show the publishing. What I could do is take some screenshots or maybe a short video and show how that works, and we can send it out to you all. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. Hopefully everybody has a nice Christmas, a nice New Year, and I will see you all again in 2025. Thank you so much.